So I've been working on a really cool sci-fi shader that I think will work really good for megastructures. So I looked up megastructures on YouTube to see what I could find, and I found this completely non-Blender video about game design that was really cool, and I was really impressed by the visual that this guy had in this game design program. And I thought, you know what, I can make something like that in Blender, and let's give it a try. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make this awesome visual right here. So the makeup of it is really simple. It's really just a very cube-based mesh that gets mirrored into four corners, thus having a three-dimensional shape from only modeling one corner, and we get the other three automatically. And then that mesh is arrayed along one plane, and then that array is arrayed along another plane, and then lastly, those two arrays are arrayed on a third plane. So we have a basically cube array of a mesh from cubes. So it's lots of cubes. Now this is supposed to be very low poly because as you start duplicating this mesh across your scene, you're going to add up a lot of vertices, a lot of faces, and that can be very difficult for computers to process if they're not very high powered. So I'm going to really try to keep this example specifically low polygon. If you want to go higher, or if you think your computer can handle more, then have at it. Add details, add all kinds of stuff. But don't say I didn't warn you. And also, I'm going to keep this in Eevee. I don't think I've done any tutorials in Eevee. I just don't use it very much, except for very specific, really stylized looks like this one. We're not going for photorealism. We're going for an artistic, almost abstract, dreamy look. And that's great for what we can do in Eevee with very little processing power because we're not doing ray tracing. There's no reflections. There's not even really any materials. This is very different for me, but it's strictly a piece of art. So let's get to making this thing. So with my 3D cursor set in the center, which you can get reset by pressing Shift C, there we go, I'm going to add a cube. So Shift A, add cube. Let's go to a flat above you by hitting the number key 7. Zoom in a little bit with your plus sign. And let's go into edit mode. And they're already pre-selected. So we're actually going to move these off axis, but I want to move them exactly off axis so there's no gap. So we're going to use the numbers. So hit G, X, 1. There we go. See that, how it's perfectly aligned with the grid? And then we're going to move it down. So G, Y, 1, or up, whatever. So that's good. So the origin, look at this. The center of the cube is right there. That's actually the center point of the cube, even though the faces are all offset. So that's good. Now let's go into our modifiers property. Looks like a wrench or spanner if you're on the other side of the world. Go to add modifiers and use mirror. There we go. Look at that. We got half of what we want. Now we're going to choose Y also. Sweet. So all we're doing is look at this. We're modeling one cube and we get all the other sides of what's going to be a platform. So let's press A for select all, SZ to scale it on the Z-axis. We're going to make this like a piece of floor platform. Let's subdivide this a whole bunch of times. So you can go, the way that I like to do it in this situation is Control R to make a loop cut. And let's make it 8, enter, and enter again, because we don't want to slide them. And then Control R over here, number pad 8, enter, enter. With all these faces created, we have a lot of possibilities for shapes and whatnot. So A again, I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. There we go. Now let's grab some center pieces and make a big thick column. By the way, I pressed letter C for the circle select tool. Gives you kind of a Photoshop brush looking tool here. And you can grab faces. Press E to extrude them up. Awesome. Let's go down here and grab maybe a thinner column of cubes. E, extrude them down. Now we can get creative and grab a few squares here and make them into columns. So I'm going to press E to move them up. And then I for inset. Watch this. It makes a smaller square. Let me zoom in a little bit. Easier to see. Now we've got a smaller square inside that. GZ to move it upwards. E again to extrude that. Then you could just have fun, kind of doing pseudo architectural stuff. Now watch this. If I want to expand all these squares on their own, look, this is weird. I don't like this. We need to change this setting right here to individual origin. So now the individual origin of each square is how the scaling is going to work. So just be aware that that's that's going on if you're having some trouble. I'm not sure why these squares are open down here, but I'm going to Alt select them, which grabs the whole rim around the edge and just fill it with a face. Not the best practice, I know, but you know what? For this, no one's going to notice, so it's okay. And again, I'm going to do something that's going to make some of you cringe. I'm going to scale and expand this up. And this is actually overlapping itself in the middle, but again, no one can tell. It's okay. You can break the rules sometimes for art, right? That's what art's all about. So the mindset behind this and what I'm really making is I'm pretending like I'm making a legitimate video game level that would be fun to explore. So have that in mind if that's what you're going for, something video game related. Make it interesting, make it dynamic, have a little bit of logic to it, but it's okay if it doesn't always make sense. If you really want to get in depth, add some stairs to get to the higher levels, maybe some ladders, even some railings to make it realistic. But remember, those details that are adding realism are also adding lots and lots of polygons, and it could potentially slow down or even crash Blender once we start duplicating this mesh up to 256 times. So I'm going to speed this process up because I'm going to try and make this into an interesting multi-leveled structure. If you don't know a lot about hard surface modeling, I definitely encourage you to check out some of my other videos about hard surface modeling, because basically all I'm doing here is playing with faces and edges with very basic editing techniques. So check out my hard surface modeling videos in my Blender playlist. I also want to take this time real quick to let you know that I am now selling assets and resources online through Blender Market as well as Gumroad. So these products will include shaders, node groups, models, kit bash, and modular systems that are going to be really great for learning Blender as well as creating cool stuff really quickly without having to do all the groundwork up front. So if you're interested in that, definitely go check out my accounts and see what's online. Maybe there's something on there that you need. So if you'd like to support my art through there, please consider buying one of my products. And I will be continuing to make more assets and resources to put on there. I'm going to go to object mode and choose a matte cap to make this hopefully a little bit easier to see without us having to render it. I want my brain to more easily process these shapes. There we go. I kind of like this a little bit darker. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some bridges that stick out pretty far, but I need them to be the exact length sticking out. So to do that, I'm going to use a 3D cursor as a nice little trick. So watch this. Let's see, where's my actual corner? Okay, this is my real corner over here. So first I'm going to grab these faces right here. These are going to be a bridge. And these are going to come out. Let's do E1. Oh, wrong direction. E -8. Let's see, is that too far? Yeah, it's a little too far. E -4. Okay, I like that. So this is going to distance all these sections apart from each other to give some breathing and airspace in between, which is important. So this will be the main bridge. We're going to add some more minor bridges down here. I think this will be cool right here. But I need to make this the exact same length, and it's kind of gonna have to eyeball it. But I can use the grid, so I'm gonna go back to 7. Actually, maybe there we go, 1 for a side view. Turn on my little magnet up here, which is snap to grid, and I'm gonna press E. And look at this, it's snapping perfect right there. Now these are not perfectly snapped to the grid, so I'm gonna grab these end faces, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 again. And then just G, what is this? X. All right, so it's close, but it's not perfect. So here's the trick. I'm going to plant my 3D cursor on a place that I do know is perfectly on the grid, which this face is. So type Shift S and then cursor to selected. So 3D cursor, look at that, is now right on that selected face. Now, my 3D cursor is where I need it to be as far as the distance is, but these guys are not. So I'm going to grab these faces very carefully, Shift select them, not moving my 3D cursor, press 1. And now here's the trick. I'm going to turn off my magnet. Now I'm going to scale these on the X axis, which is left and right, but I wanted to lock onto the 3D cursor. So change your origin point to 3D cursor, S, X, and then press 0. Look at that. It moved very minutely, but it is perfectly above and on the X axis where the 3D cursor is. So I just use my 3D cursor as a perfect origin point. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that the shading on this platform, these two platforms are different. They're much darker. So why is that? Well, it's because when I modeled it, I did a lazy technique and I got something wrong. I extruded inside of itself or through itself instead of up in the right direction. So the normals on these pieces are reversed. Now, you may not understand what that means, but if you do encounter this, here's how to fix it. Go into edit mode, grab the part that is darker than it should be or where the normals are reversed, select it, and then press Control L and it'll grab the whole linked section, because this was its own separate face that turned into a platform and I added bridges. So they're all selected. Now just press spacebar or go to your search function and type in flip normals. There it is right there. And enter, voila, the normals are correct. Now this platform, same problem, Control L, spacebar, enter. Everything else, I think I did properly. This one looks a little dark down here. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I did it wrong. Let's try it out. Yep, it looks normal. And I'm just going to say I'm happy with that. Okay, cool. So let's get back to our bridge making. We've got bridges on this side. Now need bridges on this side. And they need to be, in my opinion, the same so that everything will look nice and symmetrical. So grab the same faces right here. And I did E4, I think. Let's try E4. Yep. So they're the same length as these bottom small bridges. Let's set our 3D cursor there. So Shift S, cursor to selected. There we go. It's right down there. Now we're going to grab these guys, and we can actually save ourselves some time by just extruding exactly to this point. So how do we do that? Make sure your origin point is 3D cursor. Now press E, enter. Now the trick has to do with the scaling function. We can scale this based on the 3D cursor. If we do this, just S, what is it doing? It's scaling down to the 3D cursor, which is right there. Now we can, like I did earlier, do a specific axis or axes. So SY, look at that, it scales outwards like this. Now if we do 0, it'll go exactly to where the 3D cursor is, which is what we want. So with those faces selected, SY 0, enter. They have to be extruded first, or you're just going to be moving things out like this. You don't want that. Well, maybe you do, but I don't. So now everything is perfectly lined up, and I am very happy with that. Scale Y0. There we go. We've got kind of a thin bridge on top. Yeah, lots of layers to work with. Now, don't add too many layers and don't make them too wide. Honestly, I think these bridges are not even bridges anymore. They're just ginormous platforms. So I'm going to, yeah, I'm definitely going to move these over because they're going to block too much visibility. Remember earlier when I said breathing room? You do need that empty gap room in between these crazy platforms so that there's enough room to see the other platforms through. If you cover up too much of this negative space, there will be not enough room for the visibility of the rest of it. So there we go. I just thinned them out by moving those platforms over. Now let's get to duplicating this thing and using up the processing power on my computer. So we're using a mirror modifier, which again takes this quarter and just badoop, makes it 4. Awesome. Now we're going to use the array modifier. Very helpful, but also be very careful how you use it. So look at this. The bridges. Oh, I was lazy down here. I knew it. I knew I was going to regret that. Let's go down here. Let's make the array modifier invisible by hitting the monitor button. Set my 3D cursor with the bridge that I do know is correct. Grab the incorrect bridge. Scale X0. There we go. It was just like a pixel. But you know what? Every pixel counts. So there we go. Now there's no gap. Okay. So we've duplicated it one time. We're going to need much more than 2 copies. Let's start with 8. Ooh, look at that. We got a whole city skyline of crazy video game levels that would take forever to get through. So we're going to now basically array this array. Okay, we're going to do 3 levels of array. This is just the first one. Second level, oh, by the way, this is on the X, okay? X is going this way. If you look at my grid, see that red line? It also corresponds to this little gyro gimbal thingy up here. It shows you what direction is what. Green is Y. And X is red. So we've got the X array going. Let's make another array modifier. And by default, it's on X, but it's making it, is duplicating this. But we're going to put X at 0 and Y at 1. Okay, so we're building this way. And make this 8 as well. So we've got 8 copies of the X array, which makes how many? 8 times 8, 64. You got to know that if you're going to be a Blender master. You got to get your factors of 8 memorized. Now we're going to array these 2, which is going to turn 64 into 512. Yeah, I totally knew that. Totally had that memorized. We're going to add another array, but first I want you to check down here. Faces is currently 258,000 faces. Okay, that's kind of a lot. By the way, if you don't see that information down here, you can go to your overlays and check on statistics, and it shows you, what's going on. So we're going from 258,000 up to make another array. Scroll down to that third array. Remember, you can collapse and expand these by hitting the little arrow. Make this 0x, 0y, 1z. So it's going up on the z-axis. And here we go. You might want to save your project before you do this one. 8, enter. Oh, it took a second to think about it. But look at that. Holy moly, that looks amazing. Whee! Okay, so we went up to 2 million. Oh, wow. So from 258K to 2 million faces. And this is just using the number of 8. On my real project that I did in the animation earlier, I think I had about 12 or up to 16. And yeah, if I went to edited mode, it took about 10 seconds to even like from Blender to catch up to me. And I was kind of pushing the envelope with my system, which is pretty good. But this is just a lot of points to keep track of. So yeah, there we go. Let's collapse these. So we got 1, 2, 3 arrays with the mirror. Now we're ready to place our camera. So Shift C to get our 3D cursor back to the center of our grid, which by the way is right here, that very first cube building segment, whatever you want to call it. Shift A to add and add a camera. Okay, now let's go to your camera settings. We got to change a few things first before we get going. Make sure your endpoint is pretty high, maybe even 10,000. I'm not sure how big this is, but if it's too small, you won't be able to see the rest of your cubes. It'll just cut them off. As for your focal length, for this type of art, let's go with really wide angles. So let's start at 18 and see what that looks like. Now with the camera selected, press Control 0, which assigns the selected camera to the main camera. And look at this, we're inside the cube. Whoa, we're gonna get outside the cube. So hit G, just drag your mouse and boom, we are in the crazy video game world. Oh, I'm still on my 3D cursor, which is why this camera is moving weird. Let me show you from an outside view what's happening. The 3D cursor is there and my camera is wiggling around it. So let's go back to individual origins, 0 to get back to camera view, RR for, I guess I call it free rotate. And you can move your mouse around and really freely rotate like that. Cool. So let's point it upwards. Or if you're at the top, you can look downwards for a freaky, scary view. So you're going to fall down. And I wanted this to be even wider. So maybe 12. Oh yeah, that's really wide. We can hit GZ to zoom kind of backwards, depending on where the orientation of your camera is. You can, of course, hit G to just kind of pan and move around like that. But get an interesting view. You can make it symmetrical or asymmetrical. You can rotate it upside down like you're looking down. Oh yeah, that is kind of scary. That's freaking me out because I don't like being up high. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to do this flip flop from what I did earlier. I just rotated my camera, by the way, 180, just manually by doing that. And you don't want to see the empty chasm of nothingness. You want nothing but structures to be in your view. So I might press GY to slide down here. There. So now even my corner of my screen is filled with these structures. And I want this to be kind of an open space right here instead of being on a platform. Awesome. So let's render this and see what it looks like. All right, look at this amazing render. There's about 2 million faces here and it's pure black. Well, that's because we have no lights. So minimize this, and I'm actually not going to add lights. You're right. You heard that correct. I'm not going to add any lights to my scene because the final result we're going to get is going to look awesome, not because of lighting for a change, but because of a compositor trick that's going to give us that atmospheric mist look. So to do that, we have to turn on a few things. First, go to your camera and then your camera settings, go to viewport display and turn on mist. Next, go to your world settings and open up your mist pass. And we're going to play with this. So what this is, there's a starting and a depth point. So I'm going to get out of my camera view. And I'm going to look at this camera from number 1, which is a nice sideways view. Our camera is actually down. Let me delete this extra camera. Get rid of that guy. Here we go. If you look really closely, you can notice it's upside down. And we got this weird yellow line. This is actually the mist parameters. So we're going to extend our starting point to pretty close to the camera, right around here. And then your depth, just drag it all the way up until it gets not to the exact end, but before the end. This is basically the starting and the ending point of the gradient of our mist pass. So to turn on your mist pass, make sure you go into your view layer properties and turn on mist under data. Now let's change our viewport. Let's drag this viewport down and turn this top window into the compositor. Turn on the compositor by checking use nodes. And now our area is empty, although I know there's some nodes in here somewhere, but if you press the period key, boom, it automatically will bring you up to whatever nodes are selected. Now these you guys do not have because I've already added these to my startup file. This is probably pretty close to what you should have when you turn on your nodes. Now we're going to add a few very easy nodes. Don't worry, this is not complicated. I think there's only 2 nodes needed. So Shift A, search and type in mix, MIX, and it's just mix. It's the same as mix RGB. if you're familiar with the material nodes. So the image of basically our rendered image data is going into the first input or image. The second image data slot is going to be filled with the color white. Make sure it's pure white. Our final render, which was black, would be at 0, which is the first slot. And as we crossfade or mix over to full 1.0, now it's pure white. In fact, if I go to my render, look at that, it is pure white. If I put it in the middle, guess what it is? Half black, half white, gray. Okay, I guess I know what I'm doing. So what we need to do to make this really work is grab our mist pass, which is here, and input it into vector. So now the black and white data that the mist pass is going to generate is going to basically be a mask that's fading us between the black of the unlit scene into the white of this pure white RGB. So now look at this. If I go to my rendered view, instantly it's already updated. That's pretty sweet. Now this is only because I already had the mist pass active, which is here for me. But if you did not see this, you may have to re-render it so that that mist pass can be created. Now, this is not very impressive. I don't feel like the scale is quite, giving me an anxiety attack or claustrophobia or vertigo or whatever. So to do that, you can make your objects more busy and larger, also closer together, and you can add more copies, even just on the downward direction, and make this mist stretch out farther. Let's do that real quick. So we're going to make this go all the way to the end. So camera settings, oh no, actually world settings, the depth part, here we go. How deep is it? Let's go all the way past these last few. And I'm not sure if this updates instantly. Let's see, let's make it really short. Yeah, it doesn't update automatically. So let's stretch it all the way out and re-render. Ooh, very different. Look at that. That looks pretty sweet. Now, I'm definitely getting a lot of vibes. I don't even know how to describe it. This is very interesting art. It's almost anime, but it's kind of vector. It's kind of steampunk and gothic and horror. It's just a lot of things. And I hope you feel the same way. So there's a lot of possibilities here. One way you can add some color to your scene is by going to color and add a RGB curves, which splits your basically your image data, which right now is just black to white pixels, right? Gray scale, the scale of grayness from black to white. It splits it into C, which means color, which is all the colors together. You can make contrast brighter or darker. It splits it. It also gives you R, G, and B, which is red, green, blue. So if we increase the blues by just dragging upwards, look at this. There's more blue in the scene. We drag it way up. There's a lot more blue, but there's still R and G, which is giving this some different hues. So we can turn down G or green to get more magenta and purple. Turn it up to get a nice sky blue atmosphere color. What about our red? If we drag red down, makes it more pure blue. If we drag it up, more to the purple, right? Because red plus blue is going to be purple. So play with that, find something you like. You can also add contrast by doing what's called the S curve in the Photoshop world like that. Or you can kind of invert it to make it flatter and less dynamic. I'm probably just going to leave this where it's at. And I'm pretty happy with that right there. Now, I feel like this is not as deep as it should be. So I'm going to find out which axis is going to add more shapes down in this hole. And also over here, it's empty as well. So 0 to go into my camera view. And I'm going to do a little bit of experimentation here, trying to not overtax my computer. I'm going to turn off this first array. Yeah, that's the one that goes actually upwards, but I'm looking downwards, right? My camera's upside down. So this is actually positive Z going up into the sky. So if I increase this from 8 to 12, oh, here we got some more. I'm going to get a little wild here and hit 16. Oh, yeah, that's nice. Now over here, let's see what axis this is. In my camera view, I'm looking over here at my little 3D compass. Looks like Y is going that direction. So which one has positive number on Y? Not the first one, the second array. So if I add stuff to this one, let's do 12. It should stretch out on the Y-axis. Yeah, there we go. And that's good enough for me. If I keep going, I'm going to slow things down. Okay, now we have more shapes to deal with, which means we can make our atmosphere or our mist much deeper. Look at this. We're only at halfway right now. So that's good. We got extra room. So go to your world tab. Here's my camera. By the way, if you click on it, you can see the range better. And let's make this really deep. Whee, all the way out there. Awesome. This is our matrix of cubes we're looking at. Pretty sweet, huh? I hope your computer's doing all right. All right, now I'm going to go back to my render view. I'm going to show you how to do an A-B comparison of this render versus the next render. So to do that, hit the letter J. And if you look up here where it says slot 1, it should jump to the next one. Slot 2, which has nothing in it. Nothing's been rendered yet. So hit F12 to render. Go get yourself a snack and come back. Actually, it shouldn't take that long because it's Eevee. Look at this, way deeper and way further out over here. So if we hit J again, it'll switch back and forth between slot 1 and slot 2. Interesting, huh? Pretty cool. Now the atmosphere is changing because we changed the depth. It's deeper, so it means it has to stretch out farther. And yeah, I kind of like this brightness, but I want more shapes. So you could put the depth back to where it was. I think it was at 65. Now it's at 180. So I'm just going to go in between, maybe around 100. There we go. So we have more shapes, but the atmosphere should be a little bit denser than it was in my most recent render, this one. Maybe go even back to 80. Nice. Now I can't go on without fixing this annoying little modeling mistake that I made where I was doing these columns and I didn't quite finish it. So I'm going to turn off my array modifiers with the little monitor and then get out of my camera view. Here we go. These things, they don't go anywhere, and that's annoying me. So let's fix that real quick by adding a cube, move it down, GY1, GX1, just like we did in that very first step, right? Remember that? Make it nice and thin for a piece of ground, move it up, and let's add a beveled portion, which I don't think we did a whole lot of. So go to edge select, grab that edge, Control B to bevel it, and there we go. I think that will end that little piece nicely. And then it'll continue on to the next part, which will stack right here. And I think that looks pretty cool. All right, so let's turn back on our array modifiers and see how that does look. There's those going this way. The second modifier goes that way. And the third, which stacks vertically. Wait for it. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, all right, cool. All right, now there's a whole lot of things you can do with this. You can animate your camera by making it, fly through these things, doing all kinds of cool curves, and you can make it look like you're falling down, endlessly. You could even make this a visual loop. If you time it just right, you can make a never-ending loop, especially with that mist, because it obscures the very end. You can never see the limitation of your modeling. So this would be a really easy, seamless, never-ending loop to make. And, that's a cool visual. Even make the camera, change perspective and change angles for a really cool VJ loop. Lots of stuff you can do with this if you're just a little bit creative. One thing that I added that was really easy to my scene that you saw earlier was just some hanging cables. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Then I'll set you loose and, you can model them on your own and really spend time on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click right and just on top of this bridge right here. Also, I'm sorry, let me get some more room. I always do this. That's better, isn't it? So I'm going to left click on top of this bridge and the 3D cursor will automatically kind of land on the nearest surface because I just want it nearby. So now I'm going to do Shift A. I'm going to add a curve Bezier and we're going to rotate this. So RZ90. Okay, now it's going roughly the right direction. I'm going to tab into edit mode, select this curvy one and just delete it. So delete key, vertices. Now grab the one that's not deleted, which is just 1 point, and extrude it by hitting letter E and then the correct axis. In this case, it's Y. So there. So we've got this, let me zoom into it. So we've got this Bezier curve that's not really doing anything. We can't even see, the thickness of it because there is no thickness. Now this, by the way, this end over here is actually reversed. If you see that it's curving backwards. So select it in RZ180. There we go. Now it's going from point A to point B. And there's no twisting or anything like that. Let's give this some thickness and turn it into a wire by going into the curve properties, scroll down and go to geometry, and then add some depth to the bevel portion. Look at this. Turns it into a cylinder. Oh, and over here, this piece is also rotated wrong. So RZ180. There we go. Now it's a straight cylinder. All right, let's make it much thinner. In my final project, I did .04 for most of them. So yeah, that's a good thickness, .04. Now here's where it gets interesting, although not complicated. go into edit mode of your Bezier curve or Bezier. I don't know. Press A for selecting all, go up to segments and subdivide. All that did is it added another point right here. Now we're going to drag this down. So GZ and go down like that. Now I've got a hanging chord, but the ends of it aren't quite realistic. So I'm going to press 3 to get a side view. Now remember, everything in our scene is actually upside down. So I'm sorry if that's a bit much for you to handle, but remember I flipped my camera upside down to make it look cool. I could just move my camera on top of the block and flip that, but yeah, not going to do it. So we've got what will be a hanging cable. We could make a few more of them like this and, make it hanging at a different kind of thickness. Make some up real close and tight, kind of skew them like this to either side. Also varying the thickness of them is fun. So I'll do this .02, make this one .03. You get the point. Make some skinny ones, make some thick ones, but make them hanging from the bottommost bridge for most visual impact. So I'm selecting them all, press GZ, and I'm going to put them right here. Now these look like they're going up to us, but when I hit 0, our camera view, I got some hanging cables. They're more visible up here. So I'm actually going to move these actually down. So there. Now we can grab this whole bunch. We can do Shift D to duplicate, enter an RZ90. Oh, I forgot to change something. Make sure you've got median point selected. That way they'll all rotate together and stay flat. So with that selected, RZ90, there we go. See that? Now we can just G to move these over, put them under this bridge. Where are we at? Yeah, they're definitely not under a bridge right now. So we got to kind of move them around a little bit. Cool. Now don't let them all be copy and paste of these wires over here. You do need to, make them different. Also, my camera view right here is really tight. I keep intersecting stuff. So press in, go to view, and change your focal length of your viewport to something like 35 or 20. That'll give you a wider angle. Maybe that's a little too wide. Let's do 28. Okay, 30. There you go. And also turn up your endpoint. If your endpoint is really low, watch this. 10. I can't see past 10 meters in my digital camera, in my simulated camera. As you drag this up, you can see more and more and more and more. I have this at 1000 by default, so I can see everything. And then .1 in case I get close up to something. So we move these cables there, go back to your camera view, make sure you're spending time on things that are actually really going to have visual impact. Don't be putting wires so far down you can't even see them, or so far out there that they're not really making any, effect on the viewer. You want, something that's interesting and has believable variation. Like right now, I just moved those 3 different wires, I think, and that already looks very different than this arrangement. You also remember have scaling, which will warp it a little bit. Play with your thickness, not that thick, and play with your placement forwards and back and left and right to give a lot of good variation. Now let's render this and see what these wires are looking like. They're looking nice and dark. That's a great silhouette. So this also visually is great because it's breaking up the brightness and it really establishes a great foreground. You know what adds some really amazing detail would be to add some people. Just add people walking, or maybe just one guy. The classic ArtStation concept art is some dude in a spacesuit looking at some amazing sci-fi landscape, right? About 80% of the art online is that. So maybe do something different. Add a whole crowd of people. Add a kid, an adult, make it a little story, a family. I don't know. A dinosaur? It's really up to you. Just go crazy with it. So wires is one way to add detail to this. You can also get some greeble packs online or add some railings, maybe even add some area lights underneath these platforms to light these things up. There's of course textures, but remember with this current setup, we're not actually seeing the surface of these meshes. We're not seeing any shaders or texturing or even materials. There is no material on these faces, but that doesn't matter because what we're seeing right now is actually the mist pass being applied to a black versus white. And then we're colorizing it with that curves node. So this is a bit of a cheat when it comes to 3D art. But again, we're going for a very stylized look, so we can get by with it. Now, what happens if I add some light to this scene? Well, it gets a little tricky because we got a very large scene. So your lights are going to have to be very large and very powerful. Let's try the area light. I'm going to move it out here. I'm going to flip it around, RY180. Now it's facing downwards. I'm going to make this a pretty big rectangle. Here we go. Move it right here, kind of outside the camera view, shining downwards. And I'm not sure about the power yet, so let's try 1000 watts and hit render. Interesting. Look at this. We've got all kinds of new details and shading showing up just with that one light at 1000 watts. Maybe let's turn it down 1/10 of the power to 100 watts. Hit render. And there we go. This area light, remember, is right here. So it's really only brightening up like this portion, not so much over here. But when it was at 1000 watts, it really looked like it was lighting up the whole area, which is pretty interesting. Maybe something in the middle, like 500 watts. You can also make duplicates of these lights. You can kind of place them around, really around where your camera is, because that's really all that matters if you're going for this look. And let's go into our render view here and see if it looks anything like what our final render is. We don't have compositing nodes working right now. We don't have that mist pass doing anything in this rendered view, but we can see the effect of this area light. So I'm going to move it around and see what happens. So GY, we're sliding it into another kind of sector, which is going to cause more cast shadows. So GX to slide it away from the camera. And we instantly are encountering all kinds of shadow issues because Eevee's not great with light. He doesn't have ray tracing, which means the shadows are also not as good as cycles will be. And there's so many shapes in this scene. Let me get out of the camera view. No matter where we put this light now, there's going to be, cast shadows coming all over the place, such as over here. Each bridge is going to be making a shadow go somewhere. Now, how about we rotate it over to where we want it to point towards our camera view? And this might be interesting. Let's try this. Also, I'm going to do an A/B comparison. So this versus the next render slot, which is slot 1. I'm going to go back and forth. So over here, over there. Maybe you can add some interest with something, using the direction of your light. But don't expect too much from Eevee in terms of shadows and light bounces. It's going to look a little bit flat. Shadows are going to be a little funky. Now, what if we render the same scene in cycles? I wonder. Let's try that out. Switch to cycles. Again, save your project before you do anything, because this kind of project is one that will crash your computer. So I'm going to save this because I haven't saved it. And I'm going to do my A/B comparison trick again. So with our render view open, so Eevee is on slot 1. That's my most recent render when I angled the light. And then slot 2, which has this old render in it, will now be cycles. So I'm going to hit render now. Wow, look at that. The light is so much better. It's so soft. It's bouncing around. It's reflecting. The shadows look great. Really digging this look. And then boom, we got the compositor node for the win, adding our mist pass. So let's go back and forth between Eevee and cycles. Cycles, Eevee. Not a big difference. It's really all about shadows. The reason why the shadows are dimmer in the cycles version is because those shadows are being lit up by light bouncing backwards from other surfaces, because the light is just bouncing all over the place like ping pong balls. You can actually see some of that light bouncing right here. See this face? It's lit up by the light almost directly. It bounces back onto this bottom surface, and you can see the illumination. Pretty cool. If you want to add some contrast back, you can go to your render settings and find the color management. Make sure this is set to filmic and choose very high contrast. And it gets a little darker. The dark parts are pretty almost black over here. So that's about it. If I get any deeper, I'll be going way over an hour and might even crash my system. But worst of all, I'll be boring you and keeping you from making your own projects. So I encourage you to use these techniques, enhance them, make them better than I did, go farther than I did, add details, add people, play with colors and story, and make something super epic. And be sure to email me your renders, because I love seeing y'all's work. That really makes me smile. So email it to me when you're done with it. Thanks for watching and have a great day.